everyone, and welcome. So good to see you here and so good to be with all of you. And thank you for choosing to be part of the conversation today on inclusive leadership, intersectional identities at work. My name is Fatma. I am from the ThinkHuman team, and I'm tuning in from Tunisia, Tunis today, but I know we've got an international crowd, so let us know, let's connect. Let us know what is your name in the chat and where you're dialing in from today. Let me take a peek at the chat to see where people are dialing in from. Wow. Okay. I can't even read these names. Los Angeles, New York, Austin, Quebec, California, Canada. This is amazing. It's so nice to see all of you and to be all connected on just one platform and part of one conversation. Welcome to those who just got a shout out and to everyone who is sharing this space with us today. We're really grateful to have you here. Please take from this conversation whatever you need to serve you and your growth. And please don't let the growth stop here. We encourage you to connect with a teammate, your manager, a friend, or loved one, or even maybe a coach or a therapist to talk through whatever you learned today, so you can take care of yourself and feel empowered to continue having these conversations in your community. So we're going to get warmed up in the chat for today's conversation. And since we're talking about intersectionality and inclusive leadership, let us know, what are your intersectional identities? This is a good exercise even for you to be aware more of your identity, the ones that maybe are hidden from you, from your the general awareness, and the ones that usually pop up for you. So feel free to share both or to just think about them and take note on your journal. Would love to read a few here so we can see what everybody is sharing. I love that people are sharing their pronouns. This is amazing. Female gay parent. We have Latino middle class. We have people from different identities. We have people sharing their, it's great to see people sharing their pronouns. It's a great habit to develop. Alrighty. Thank you all for your shares. Continue sharing your contribution on the chat because it's very helpful to have your comments, your questions. Sometimes it can bring an insight to someone on the conversation or someone in the team itself, or even steer the conversation to a whole other direction. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat and to be involved. We want you here so the conversation can get richer. The webinar wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our fantastic partners and the commitment and heartfelt work of our team and leadership team at ThinkHuman to provide a safe and brave space to have these real conversations in the world like this one, and also in the world of work. So I'm thrilled to introduce ThinkHuman and our partner Bravely for today's webinar. ThinkHuman is a leadership development organization that supports HR and L&D leaders with implementing community-centered and experiential-based leadership programs that are built to support a culture of belonging. The leadership training programs we offer, in particular our flagship programs, Leader Lab and Mini Lab, are designed to create mindset shifts and behavioral change over time that sticks. Towards the end of the webinar, a poll will pop up so you can let us know if you're interested in hearing from ThinkHuman or our partner Bravely. I'll also put in a link to Asia's calendar in the chat so you can connect with her and book some time on her calendar if you want to learn more about ThinkHuman. Next, we have Bravely. Bravely is a self-directed, individualized coaching solution built to provide transformative company-wide coaching for every employee at all levels, so they can thrive throughout the career moments that matter. Bravely makes life at work better for everyone by scaling the individual support and critical skill development employees need to grow, thrive, and remain engaged at work. When leading organizations offer Bravely coaching to everyone, they scale to the support offered by their people team and managers and transform their cultures in an evolving world of work. To learn more, visit workbravely.com. Thanks again to our partner and to ThinkHuman and to our amazing panelists for helping us bring this event to life. Before we dive into the webinar, we would also like to share an artistic moment, as that is a ritual on ThinkHuman webinars. And we would like to clear our minds and settle in for this conversation We hope that this helps you feel more grounded and open for today's discussion. Blessing us with his gifts, we have C.A. Williams. C.A. is a Tennessee spoken word poet and publisher of 2 books. C.A. is also the founder and coordinator of Under One Roof, a quarterly event started in June 2018 that brings together poets, comedians, and musicians. Along with writing poetry and coordinating events, he has created 3 YouTube videos from his book, Different Sides, that provide a visual of his poetry. He can be followed at C.A. Williams Poet on Instagram or Facebook, and he can tell you again if there's any other way to connect with him, to maybe bring him to your company to read some poetry as well. So without further ado, I'll pass it to you, C.A.
Hello, glad to be here. I'll be sharing 2 poems from my book, Different Sides. And this first piece is titled Equal Rights. I have this friend. It doesn't matter if this friend is male or female, black or white, but I have this friend who claims to fight for equal rights. And when I heard that, it had me thinking about the time I went marching for equal rights, for women's rights. And I talked about how I marched with those ladies side by side. And then I talked about the time I marched for equal rights, for civil rights. And I talked about how I marched alongside some who were white. And there was no judgment given when hearing I marched with women. There was no criticism given to the white people that marched with Black ladies, Black men, Black children. But then I talked about the time I marched. This time alongside gay men and lesbians. And now my friend had questions like, what are you doing and what are you thinking? Followed by statements like, you should have brought your girlfriend so others aren't mistaken. And I look to my friend and say, you are a hypocrite, because that march was no different. I still march for equal rights. I literally just write poetry about my real life, but I also like to write poetry that has surprise endings. So this next piece is titled Together Forever. I want to start by saying you and me. You and me for eternity, that's the way it should be. For it was not too long ago you left me, you left my life empty. It was like you was trying to play a game of hide and go seek. But now since I found you, I want to tell you that every morning I wake up and every night I go to sleep. I want to feel your presence next to me. For you have such a true beauty and no one can tell me differently. For when I speak certain words, certain poems, certain lyrics, some people may say that I have no common sense, but that's when you whisper in my ear and say, yes, you are different. You whisper your words may be the healing for someone who's sick. It's because of you, I know who I am. I no longer have to straddle the fence. So I write this poem to you. First name, self, last name, confidence. From this day forward, self-confidence and I will be together forever. Thank you all very much. Again, my book, Different Sides, can be found on Bookpatch and Amazon.
Thank you so much, CA, for that wonderful performance to open the webinar for today. And for folks who are joining, I'm Asia Smith from the ThinkHuman team. I'm on the panel for today. And so I just want to give a shout out to our moderator, Latoya Lynn, who's going to be guiding our conversation. So let's give her a shout out.
Hello, everybody. Whoop, whoop. I think I can hear the crowd out from all over the world. Hey, I'm Latoya Lynn, Chief People Officer at Help Scout. ThinkHuman enthusiast. This is like my foster family. Like if there was a house, I'll be part of the ThinkHuman house. And I am your resident queer. That's going to be a part of it. So I would invite all my fellow panelists to take off their screens and show their beautiful faces. And I want to introduce everyone. All right. So once again, you heard from Asia Smith. So just wave out, Asia. Then we have Lauren Gilbo as well. Hello, and Alfredo Del Cid. And we have Hans Kohler in the house. Wonderful. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, good. Happy Pride.
Happy
Mhm.
Pride. Right? Happy Pride. I mean, honestly, like Pride is like, you know, Trinidadians, and we can talk about our intersectionality. They have like Carnival in a sense. Like the countdown for me is to Pride. Like, it's like, that is like where my calendar year starts.
Busy month.
Yeah.
For all of us out there, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Okay, great. So intersectionality is such a wonderful topic. And, you know, I was so thankful to be able to be asked by ThinkHuman to be a moderator for this. So, you know, as we all know, you know, it's different for everyone. So I want everyone to go around the space and just say, you know, what's your definition of intersectionality through your own experience, through your own amazing, unique differences. So I'm actually going to have Lauren kick us off, and then you can popcorn to our another panelist.
Fantastic. Thank you, LaToya.
Yeah.
I think for me, intersectionality is kind of twofold. I think one, it's the exploration of our own like identities, our experiences, our history, like what adds up to make us who we are today and how we navigate the world. And then an exploration of our differences to others, you know, through that lens. And then the piece that like hits for me the most is the discovery of similarities between people who have very different like top level intersectional identities. And you have the things underneath that we might not see that were very much so the same. And for me, I think that's where the beauty of intersectionality comes into, is the potential to connect across groups that don't have like much like of the same experiences at certain levels.
Awesome.
And
I can actually go off and say, for example, for me, I think it's very interesting how intersectionality is this social aspect of someone's identity that has the advantage and disadvantage of it. So for example, I have a white body, so that gives me an advantage or a privilege, but because I'm gay, that actually will give me a disadvantage or take that privilege away. So I think there's like a lot of discrimination and advantage that are correlated to that. But obviously the discrimination is the one that we see the most or is more obvious to us. And for example, me being Latino, I'm from Brazil, and being gay and all of that kind of takes that part of the discrimination, or it makes the discrimination more obvious. I think that it's what adds up, like I think I mentioned to you guys before, like compounded interest, right? Like it goes a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, because if someone see a white female, she has a privilege, but if it is trans, that privilege is gone, gone right. Like that.
Right.
So I think that is an interesting part.
I think, and oh, no worries. Just to add to that and like plus one that, I think, I as a trans woman, I transitioned in my like late 20s and was seen to the world as like a cis white heterosexual like male for a long time. And then, as you move into your transness, you like feel the drop down like, the privilege pyramid, and you're like, oh my God, wow. And that this is different. And then also, like, as I've, been a part of the trans community for over a decade, I've like viscerally seen and experienced the differences that trans women of color or trans people of color experience versus like what like privilege my just whiteness.
Right.
And I mean, that to me has been one of the like biggest eye-opening things about intersectionality in my own like personal journey. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Alfredo.
Yeah, one thing that I was going to say that so for me, I always talk about, I always refer to us humans as like a beautiful mess, right? And what I mean by that is just this idea that we are so complex and so nuanced, right? Like one of the things that we do as humans, the minute, like I always think about this, like when you think about plants, when you think about animals, how detailed do we get to classifying everything? And so now we're trying to, so when we try to interact with other humans, we, our brains are going to try to immediately classify us, right? And say like, well, they have these traits, they have these identities, which means that they should be these things, right? And what's so interesting is that it's not that easy. It's so complex. And to me, I think that's beautiful. It's messy at times. And I think particularly given the audience that we have, I'm seeing, people from Kuwait, people from Mexico, all over the world. One thing that I always think about is also how intersectionality, when I think about it, is also contextual and dynamic, right? So Hans spoke to being from Brazil, right? I was born in the U.S., but I moved to Guatemala when I was 6. So I'm from Latino parents. I identify as Latino, but being a light-skinned Latino in Guatemala, it was very different, right? I was seen as someone. I had a lot of privilege, right? And so I grew up with access to resources. The minute I moved to the U.S., all of a sudden my Latinx identity flips, right? And now I'm often seen differently, and maybe certain access that I had or resources that I had before, I don't have anymore, right? And so even in that way, to my identity is so interesting that depending on the sphere we're in, depending on the seat we occupy, our identities can inform the way we move in the world and the way people treat us and see us so differently. And so, when I think about like the larger picture of inclusion and belonging, I mean, think about it, right? How do we get good at making people feel like they belong when our identities are so complex, right? Like, and that's to me the crux of it. But to me, it excites me. Like, I find it so beautiful and exciting when we have to like wrestle with these things.
Yeah, and I'm just going to chime in, kind of adding on to that, because I think something really interesting about intersectionality, and it's come up, but it's what's beneath the surface that we don't see. And so as far as diversity of thought, neurodivergence, et cetera, so many other ways that we identify, I'm one of the folks on the panel for the audience, I identify as an introvert. And so I am typically that person that will sit back a little bit. And for me, I enjoy, sort of working behind the scenes, but it's interesting being in a leadership coaching space and kind of the representation that's there. And I think also for other identities that are compounding for me, and what makes intersectionality just as a topic so beautiful and dynamic and such a spectrum is that we all have intersectional identities, and quite a few of those we might share, but our lived experience of those identities, it looks different. And I think different folks on the panel brought it up. But for me as a queer Black woman, I mentioned being an introvert. I've survived trauma. I have PTSD. I have OCD. I have ADHD. There are so many different things that people don't see beneath the surface. I'm a caregiver. And so there are even things not even based on personality that all of us might experience where we're bringing this into work. And so I think for me, intersectionality, same thing that everybody else said. And then also just that freedom for authenticity to be able to express that. And then I guess as it relates to the conversation today, as teams, leaders, individual contributors, how can we create an environment that's not only diverse, but it's also inclusive, where everyone can be seen and safe and thrive. So
it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think the cool thing about it too is that it's a learning experience, and it takes effort and intention and practice. And we all learn from one another. And I think it isn't just a white or hetero thing. Even within different communities, there's intersectionality where we could be more inclusive, like even with marginalized groups. Yeah.
If I can jump in on this, I just want to just summarize some of the things that I'm hearing, right? Like, my experience in hearing your definitions of intersectionality, I felt like I was able to relate to each one of you in different ways, right? Because there's so much beyond the surface, hearing, learn your experience of transitioning and like understanding that piece and like how things have shifted for you. And like, not everything is what the eye sees, right? In the sense of, what you, like how you show up in a room and how you have to internally shift. Now you're like, oh, wait a minute, you're not responding to me in this way anymore. I don't have your attention in this kind of way. And it just becomes a new learning experience, which I think is so interesting and in that sense. Fredo, and Hans, you similarly in like the, in those communities of like, skin color. Colorism is a thing within the Latin community. I am, my intersectionality really sits in, I am a queer Jamaican, firstborn immigrant from immigrant parents, all the things, you can think of, Black women. And, it's so funny around colorism in the sense of like, I actually grew up very privileged because I was American going to Jamaica, which also brings another layer because, I mean, in Jamaica, mostly there's a lot of different backgrounds, majority are just Black. And by the way, second language in Jamaica is Spanish, if anyone was curious. But anyhow, when you think about these different things, you learn about it and you see in Asia, I really appreciate you talking about like some of the diagnoses that you might have and how like things are just different and how you approach the world based on those situations. I want to pull us to a different to a different space. Because I want to keep this narrative going, right? So let's play a game. Are we down for a game? Is that okay?
Do it.
Okay. So the game. So I want you guys to popcorn talk to each other, but the game is, if you knew me, you would know X. All right, Hans, I'm gonna throw it to you. If you knew me, you would know.
If you knew me, you would know that I'm extremely organized. And like OCD almost type of organized, and because that gives me a sense of control and peace. So I actually do that because I'm also ADD. So that actually is the only way I feel in control or, good with myself. So I'll send it to Lauren.
Oh, thank you. If you knew me, you would know I'm a true car nut. I love especially vintage cars. I adore them. And I'll popcorn it to Asia.
If you knew anything about me, it's a couple fun facts. I'm super into music, former trombone player, all that good stuff. I was probably a DJ in a past life, and I'm also into tarot and oracle cards. So anyone who's tuning in who might be into that stuff, I'm right there with you. Yeah. I am going to pass it to Alfredo. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say if you knew me, you'd know that I am a avid consumer of pop culture and history, and I use both to inform the social justice work or DEI work that I do. So if you ever want to talk about my theories around Beyonce and inclusion, we can definitely have a chat. Yeah.
I am here for Beyonce and inclusion.
July 29th, she's dropping a new album. Just saying.
Yeah. Let's do it. Okay, well, let's dive into some of the questions, right? Now that everyone kind of knows our intersectionality a little bit, right? Because we only scratched the surface, right? But it's really good to kind of lay that foundation. So, so there's a question that came here around like, how can you know if a space is truly safe beyond diversity? And what I really love about this question is really understanding the different aspects of who you are, your identity, and like, how do you really understand that? And I'll start with Lauren for that question, and then anyone can jump in.
I think really I think when we're talking in like the corporate world, I think you need to see, like, as coming into a company as an employee, I would want to see like the executives, and not only a diverse like set of like executives, but I'd like to see leaders being vulnerable with their intersectional identities and being in touch with them and open with that, and generally curious about others' experiences. I think if we see that modeled at the highest levels, and we see like a respect and understanding of those differences, and helping people navigate the workplace with those different backgrounds and things that you bring, I think that's for me when I would like say as like an employee, wow, I've found a place where really like I can bring as much as I want to the workplace, not like my whole self, right? We make that choice, like I can do that, but I would feel free to bring whatever I wanted to like into the workplace.
But I have to question that in terms of like, how would because normally would be a white straight man would show that, how would they actually show that without, because for example, the US is very complicated in certain ways relationship wise, because like there's a lot of white straight men that don't know how to do that, and they will do something that looks like sexual harassment.
Yep.
You know, so how would a white straight man actually demonstrate that inclusivity that you were talking about?
I'm gonna take a step back though, and I would say that it's not just straight white men, right? I think all of us, all of us at any point in any space can and should be allies to others, right? I don't know the experience of a Black woman, and I can't assume that because I'm a gender fluid immigrant Latinx person who has a disability, a learning disability, that makes me somehow free of making mistakes and potentially making a space unsafe for a Black woman. So I think just as a white straight man has to do the work, so do I, right? And so does everybody on this call. So one thing that I often say that I think is a little controversial is that I don't believe in a safe space. And let me give you a little more about that.
Say more.
It's not that I don't think safe spaces are a good thing, or no, that maybe they do exist, but can I truly guarantee that a workplace is going to be 100% safe for any person? I don't think so, right? I think we can create brave spaces where an individual, where the signals to me are folks in this space know how to have the mechanisms to practice accountability, know how to make mistakes and own up to them when they happen, right? Like those are the signals that tell me as a genderqueer person, I can show up in my heels, full makeup, and maybe somebody will say something, right, that makes me feel unsafe. But if the space is a brave space, that person is gonna hold themselves accountable and say, you know what, I'm sorry I said that, or I messed up, you know, let me learn about it. And so that's what I mean. Like, I don't think, I'm always weird when someone says like, oh, in this space, we're, you know, 100% inclusive, we got it all figured out. I'm like, you know, I mean, maybe it would be great. But in my, you know, many years of working, I still find that we all still step in it, right? We still make it.
Agree.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that for sure.
Can I hold in on a point here? I think what's super clear for me hearing this is wrapped around the concept of, you know, although we are diverse individuals, we are never really going to, it doesn't mean that we just know diversity. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? And I remember in one of my conversations with Lauren, we talked a bit about the trans community, right? And how there is work to need to be done there. And you said a really interesting term, like this is the loss cause, right? The houses and the mothers and all the things that kind of like teach, you know, how to like show up in the world as proud trans people. Like, tell me your perspective and your experience. Disclaimer, this is only Lauren's experience and not everybody else's. But go, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, one thing I've like discovered, like, as I've navigated the trans community and like continue to do research on our history and like where we've come from in recent times and past times, like one major difference that I've experienced as a white trans woman is that, you know, our transitions traditionally have been easier, and we've had a little bit more like acceptance in society, or we have like hidden really deeply because we weren't willing to give up that privilege. And when I look at the communities of trans women of color in particular, and like ballroom culture, where like they did not experience the same level of potential like family acceptance, society acceptance, and so they had to create their own community and world. But within that, like there was a different experience of having like elders, having matriarchs in these like ballroom families and houses that like white trans women, like, or trans people, we didn't experience, and we like still don't experience. And so like we walk through the world or navigate it in a different way because we don't have those like elders or like familial like trans communities to learn from, or at least that's like been my experience in that.
So yeah, so in summary, and I'll let everybody respond to that, everyone needs a house mother.
Yeah.
And it's missing, right? Anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here. I think, yeah, having, and whether it's at your workplace, if it is someone who's a manager or a leader or an ally, or quite literally like having someone who's like a mother, den mother. But for me, that's actually especially sensitive because I lost my mother. My mother passed away. And so any environment that I go into, that is something that I look for in terms of feeling psychologically safe. And I think for me, if I'm thinking about even that first question, because I also think it kind of ties into what Lauren said quite well as far as the different experiences and how do you elevate the folks who might not have the same level of access. And I think if I'm thinking about it from like a leadership perspective, inclusion versus diversity, and kind of like a music sort of example, since I brought that up, but if you're a conductor of a symphony, it's your job, as that person who is leading that in order to conduct and crescendo and bring out the best in all the different sections, instruments, the vocalists, etc. And it's similar. I mean, quite often we have organizations that are diverse, yes, especially on paper, but is the environment actually inclusive? And that comes from being inquisitive and curious and learning about the different identities on your team so that you're aware and you can create those spaces or create like that den mother, kind of thing. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that that sparks for me, Asia, is this idea that I call this thing curiosity of care. I've kind of coined it, and I collected in my org, where I talk about the way in which we need to practice curiosity with each other and be very intentional to not do it to each other, but to really form a relationship from a very inquisitive personal standpoint that is really to understand each other, right? And I say that particularly, I think, as we are seeing so much conversation around the political divide, the divide around people's understanding of DEI or social justice or critical race theory, like one of those that people are like kind of like, oh, we're so divided, right? And I often find that honestly in both sides of the spectrum, like if you want to look at it as a spectrum, there are folks that are just committed to like not moving 1 inch to get to know each other, right? Like there's this like, well, they absolutely are not about what I'm about, not going to engage. And that's such a miss. And for me, I take that really personal because one of the things that I share often with folks that I work with is my own journey. When I got to undergrad for my college experience, I was one of those people who was asking a lot of questions around why we needed all these special resource centers, why we needed all these special grants. I was like, we're all one people, like we're all the same. Like, why are we making all these special, programs? Like, I was like, I don't understand why we need that if we've arrived. And I had folks who literally sat me down and said, you're gonna shut up with love, but they said you're gonna sit down and you're gonna listen.
Yep.
And if it wasn't because I had folks who, again, it wasn't their job to do it, right? But they had the bandwidth and they made the choice to say, you know what, I'm gonna at least guide you in that direction. I'm gonna say, be quiet, listen, and go do some reading. If I didn't have those folks, 15 years later, I wouldn't be where I am right now doing the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And to me, that's such a personal foundation of or point of what I do. And why I think when we think about this, like building relationships, during the protests and the marches that were happening a few summers ago around Black Lives Matter, I had a lot of Black employees who were coming to me saying, all of a sudden I have managers coming to me, checking in almost daily, getting emails daily of like, oh, what do you need? What can I do? When I've never once heard from this manager and checked in on me. And all of a sudden they just want to be my friends and, give me cookies every day. And they're like, what is this, right? It was so artificial. But if we, from the very beginning, we start building those authentic relationships, just tell me who you are. Like, yes. So you voted for X person. Why? I just want to know. I'm gonna try not to judge you. I'm gonna try to just understand what is it about your upbringing, your experience, maybe your economic background that said, that's the person for me. Right. And I think when we start doing that, we make inroads, right? And that's when we can really do that transformative work.
And I think that's what's so critical with what you're saying here. It's really just around like actually doing the work. And this is actually a really good segue. Hans, I'm going to put you on the spot here as far as, thinking about, this concept. A really good question came up and it really wraps around like just really starting the process of, facilitating an inclusive workspace, right? Like, when you talk about that, like let's say you're building an onboarding program, or you're putting in your hiring process, like how would you really think about like kicking that off and starting that?
I think there's like a lot of different processes to make that happen, because like there's like simple things that people can do. Like I'll give you one example that I've seen in a company that I consulted before. They had only white people in the board, and then one person left, and the owner was like very, very, I would say, passionate to put someone that has a diversity background there. And after probably a few months, he came to me and said, "Oh, I didn't find anybody." And I was like, "Why you didn't find anybody?" And he was like, "Oh, because like the security company, this is the most qualified candidate." And it was a white straight guy. And I was like, "Well, but why you're not looking for?" "Oh, because they're not there." And like, there's a lot of excuses that happen from leaders, because and what I told them is, because when you first like look at the pool of candidates, sure, the most qualified one may be the top whatever, they're all white people, but that is a choice you're making. You can actually look for a diverse candidate if you want. You just have to look. But many times looking takes longer. Takes you have to go a little bit deeper. You have to search a little bit more. Perhaps you have to look in a different country. Perhaps you need to do a lot of these other things. But a lot of people would see this most qualified people, and then the most qualified is usually white, whatever, because also they look in their circle of friends, right? Because that's what the most qualified is as well, and they're most white. And they also looked at the most qualified from the top schools, and there's a lot of white people there. So like there's like a lot of things, but is that actually the most qualified, or is just the easiest option that you don't need to actually look deep enough to see, I want this change, I want this transformation. And what I heard from, of course, like when you tell that to leaders, they get a little defensive, because I'm basically saying, "You're a racist piece of shit, just fucking see what you're doing." But politely, obviously. And then the moment that he got defensive, he looked at me and was like, "No, but if I am doing that, am I excluding the white people?" And that for me is like, how many times probably I have heard that, I cannot tell you. So I think that it is important to go that and understand that it is important to understand and go further to see, okay, if I want diversity, I have to look for it. And I have to really put an effort to do that, because the easiest may not be the best for the organization. Something else that I think about the hiring or like recruiting overall, a lot of, if the recruiters are not diverse, I think that also creates a problem. If the recruiters are not actually looking for people that are diverse because they are diverse, that could also be a problem, because also they're looking for the most qualified, right? And a lot of the times they're not actually making an effort to do that. So actually changing that, I think, is extremely important.
Right.
Hans, I couldn't agree more. And I think like to add to your point, I think that a perspective shift that people need to have whenever you're like doing this search, like outside of like cis white heterosexual candidates, is that quite often like candidates outside of that haven't been given the experiences and opportunity yet to like fit in that traditional role. And so you have to step outside of some of those traditional qualifications and be like, what do we actually like need
looking for
like in this role, not just looking at the traditional paths of the type of college you went to, like the kinds of companies you've worked at, like those are important things. Like, and when we're considering, yes, but like when we're looking to bring more diversity to our workplace, we can't look in the traditional areas, or we're just gonna get the same thing. We have to
show people, like, whatever that might be.
Look deeper, like you said.
And I do have to say that when I'm coaching people, I ask people, so who do you want hire? And they're like, oh, I want someone who is like, and then they go into collaborative, nice, know how to work with people. And I say, that's not on the resume. That's not on the resume.
Right. Wow.
Right. So what I need to go is what? I need to talk with these people. I need to see, I need to visualize, because just that paper Just that paper doesn't mean much, right? But that paper, and I don't know if most of you know that, but like a lot of times those papers is scanned by robots. You know, they're just looking for keywords. They're not even looking for the person. They're just looking for keywords that you typed to actually look for those things. So I actually tell people, who are you looking for? Think about the essence of the person, not that which school they went to. You know, think about like the essence that you look for your team. And most of us, what we want, collaborative, know how to work with others, inclusive, you know, not be like this crazy ass people that sometimes we find in organizations. All of us probably have found those people, right?
That's true.
And the robots have bias built into them, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Majority of like people of color, non-queer people, all the things. Alfred, do you want to jump on this topic?
Well, one thing I was going to say is that I think beyond just beyond looking at like expanding what qualifications we're looking for is expanding how we think we can find those qualifications, right? Yeah. Because I think to Lauren's point around how, you know, maybe historically, if you're a person of color, you haven't had the opportunity to do maybe particular roles that are very specific to what you're looking for. But, you know, for example, a parent, right? To me, if you're a parent who's been in a particular role, that tells me a lot about your ability to do, you know, to hold multiple responsibilities and still deliver, right? So maybe you're not someone who had in your past job had a project that oversaw, you know, I don't know, 10 people, 15 people, but maybe you were, you know, you had a previous job in which you somehow managed to do a really, you know, high level job and parent at the same time. That to me is telling me you have skills that maybe in the traditional sense, you know, folks wouldn't think about it. But to me, it tells me, okay, you're that person that can do that, right? And so it's also just about expanding how we think, or, you know, what are the things that we identify as being part of those qualifications is one thing that I like to think about.
So I love all of this, and I want to summarize some of these things around like the different qualifications. Like it feels very tactical, right? There's things you can actually do, focused on the actual skill set and what's important to you. And that really helps remove the bias, right? Work is so relational, but you know, sometimes when you think about the relational side, that's where you can really like drum up more bias in that sense, and really focus on like the actual outcomes. It keeps it very objective. It can get super clear. I'm actually going to shift one more gear. I'm going to actually point it to Asia. There's a question that came up live here that said, how can we support a culture of neurodivergent inclusion? Can this be done with sensitivity towards diagnostic labels and stereotypes?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, and this actually I think kind of ties into just the previous topic about inclusive hiring and whatnot. I think throughout the entire employee life cycle, there's absolutely opportunities for leaders and organizations to be creative in how they're engaging different types of employees. And I think especially from a neurodivergent perspective, that's quite often overlooked along with so many other things. So it isn't that one thing's more important than the other, but a lot gets overlooked. And so I do feel, from experience, but just in general, I think especially in the corporate world, extroversion is typically rewarded. So as far as opportunities and being able to quote unquote move up the ladder, if you will, what can organizations do? And that's just an example, you know, related to this, but for folks who are a bit more introverted or who learn differently, for example, if you have a meeting, can you send out that agenda or those notes in advance so the folks that don't feel as comfortable speaking up in that live room or being put on the spot so that they have the opportunity to formulate their responses first. I know for me, as far as how I communicate, that is helpful for me. I think also for organizations, do you have I think I know we're not doing just a safe space. I like saying safe and brave space, so I'll couple the two. Do you have a safe and brave space where folks who are a bit more introverted or who learn a bit differently or where their attention span, you process differently, is there the opportunity for maybe those folks to have their own separate space to sort of get together and commune, for example? And so I think the opportunity to create those connection points is really important. I think quite often for folks who are, coming into the workplace where there are different levels of neurodivergence there, it's very easy to feel isolated because you don't feel like you can relate to some of the other people in your workplace. And you might have the skill and the drive there, but because of how you express yourself, you might not be that person who gets the visibility like your other coworker would. So I share all that just to kind of just dial it down and say, as organizations, as leaders, is there an employee resource group where you can be mindful of that? Again, can you be proactive? I know I mentioned sending out notes or an agenda in advance, but there are some other creative ways you can approach that as well. And I think in general, just having some sort of a space, whether it's a group or some sort of inclusion council, if you will. And so there's ERGs and also BRGs, so business resource groups and employee resource groups. But with inclusion, it's how do you engage, different stakeholders where all of those things are being considered as it relates to policy implementation. So yeah.
Can I jump on it as well?
Yep.
To Hans, go ahead.
So I coach a lot of people in a lot of a very specific question that I hear all the time is like, should I tell my leader that I have ADD, or should I tell my leader that I'm autistic, or should I tell my leader, etc. And I think that is a very interesting question when people ask, oh, should I tell my leader? Because like, what is the fear behind it is the interesting part, right? Like, why are you afraid to tell your leader that you have ADHD or ADD or whatever? And I think that's a very interesting thing to think about. And many times, because of the stigma that has the ADD, is like, does that mean that I'm not good enough? Does that mean that I'm going to miss this? Does that mean all of those things? So I'll say like a conclusion that a lot of my clients get to is like, okay, so perhaps I don't need to say that I'm ADD, but I'm going to come to my leader and say, hey, the best way for you to manage me is doing these things, right? So the person comes say, hey, like something that is very for you to be a more effective leader to me, instead of telling me something, Slack me, send me a Slack message, because that's so much more effective for me than actually just saying, oh, Hans, do this, because that's how I would actually do it, right? And for example, one of my clients who is autistic, she says that too. It's like, me teaching my leader how to effectively manage me was a way that I was able to feel comfortable expressing my conditions, my thought process, my sense of self, part of my identity that I usually don't feel comfortable. Yeah. And it's a little bit difficult, right? It's difficult to do that for a lot of us.
The trust has to be there for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's got to be the trust. And I think it is that, I love that you mentioned this with the coaching, because what we do at ThinkHuman as far as working with leaders, we focus on developmental one-on-ones and how what you already have in place in terms of systems, you can optimize that to build that trust and that empathy with your employees. So as you mentioned, Hans, those conversations can happen and they can be effective and transformative. And it's something that's ideally an ongoing feedback loop that's happening. And that's how you create an inclusive environment with diversity of thought, and you become more well-informed as a manager, and there's a ripple effect from there. And so, I just wanted to chime in. That's a great point, because it does take sometimes a bit of that education and that teaching, because we have to understand, for folks who are running these organizations, they have their own intersectional identities, and we are all learning. So there is
a whole web of what's going on. I want to pass to Lauren, and I want to pass and pop it to Alfredo for closing on this piece.
Great. I think like one of the things I think we need to look at as businesses around like neurodivergence and think about is like the first step kind of is like accommodation, creating an environment, like finding ways to like create a safe space like for like that person to like create and work within. But I think for me, like one step further as a longtime business person, I think there's an opportunity, like the best business advantage we can have is leveraging the way like our neurodivergent employees think. And like Gordon here in the chat said something that like hits with me. As a neurodiverse person, I can be more productive than you can even imagine, but I also need different support, and I know my own brain. And I think my best friend has ADHD, and I've seen like firsthand when the space is created to like allow that like brain to unlock and work, like it's at a massive advantage to the company, a massive advantage, not only in like the engagement of that employee, but actually like the output and the end result of what they're doing. And so I think thinking about like neurodivergence as like a real advantage in business and how we as an organization, like if we find ways to support that and nurture it and like create space like for that, like massive advantage to us as a business.
But I also want to say something that I said before, because it's still something that I think is important. It's like, how would a white straight man that it's not part of any of it, because we are very diverse and we have a little bit more sensitivities on how to deal with certain situations, but a white male, straight white male, how would they actually come and talk to us about it? I think it's a very difficult thing for a lot of managers and leaders that are in that identity to actually come and talk with someone like us, you know? And I think it is something that even like, of course, it's their job to learn how to do that. But and that is my personal opinion, I think I like when I'm able to teach one of my leaders, you know, to actually know how to talk with me, how to make me feel safe, how to make me feel included, even though it is their job. You know, it is their job to do it. It's not my job. I have to just be my authentic self. It's not my job to teach them how to include me. However, I feel that I like to do that because a lot of people in certain bubbles don't have that. Oh, how can I actually go there? You know, how can I actually learn? Where do I look for? You know. However, I like to say, okay, this is a great book for you to read. This is a great site for you to look at. This is a great podcast for you to listen to. And those things actually, I think is good, but it is difficult. And I can tell you, because I've coached a lot of men in that situation, because they say, well, I don't know how to approach the situation. I don't know how to go and actually talk about situation, because especially in the US after like George Floyd, I think he got even more, they are even more afraid of saying something wrong, you know, to being racist, to being xenophobic, to being whatever, you know. And I think that it's important for us to acknowge that too, you know. It's not.
Sorry, I want to interject here because I definitely agree with that point, right? And I understand that and I think this is where like I understand how folks that haven't been exposed to particular conversations or particular communities, like they, you know, it's important that folks do that self-education, and sometimes there's some of us who, either because it's literally our job, right? Like in my career, this is what I've chosen to do, to help educate others, or because we just feel called to. Like, yes, I think it's of great value when we are able to and want to help others learn. I think again, going back to the beginning of this conversation around our intersectional identities and how they're complex and dynamic, right? And they change depending on context. Some days, as a queer, gender fluid person, I am ready to talk to anybody and help them, guide them, and break it down for them. I can have a full 2-hour conversation with you about my gender. Great. Some days, like when the Pulse shooting happened, which we just recently had the anniversary of, that day the world was on fire for me. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I didn't want anybody to ask me what they could do. I did not want anybody checking on me. I just needed my day, right? And so I think it's important to also make for that space that sometimes some of us feel compelled and can do some of the education, and sometimes we don't, and it's okay, right? And I think I guess I'll close this piece, just this part with just saying that I think, I don't want to lose the focus that we all have to learn. Right, like, yes, as a person who lives at the margins at many things, I don't want that to be used as a scapegoat for me not doing my homework, right? And saying because I've been oppressed in these ways, I'm good, or I, you know, like, and part of the reason why I say that is because, yes, I think it is true that in the US particularly, there are particular identities that are given more access historically, that have had a lot of privilege, that have historically in the system, you know, served as oppressors. But even within those, you have to talk about socioeconomic status. You have to talk about education, right? So there is that white, cis, straight, poor man who hasn't had access, financial access, than maybe a counterpart, right? And again, doesn't mean that as a cis white man, they don't have access to certain things, but it also means that they also hold some identity that has also historically and still historically is not given access. And that's the messiness that I talk about, the nuance that excites me, that I think needs to be part of the conversation.
So I think with everyone here, the summary of all of this is like intersectionality is so layered, right? And then we have an opportunity to really just take a minute and don't walk in with assumptions, really lean in with curiosity on like what a situation is all about, and be open to ask questions, be open to answer questions. And then if you're in a place where you're not willing to start, educating, be honest about that too, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like we can talk about this for like 50 hours. I think we can do that, but I think we only have about 5 more minutes left, right? So with that being said, I think there's a couple of things that we want to make sure that we do. We have a poll. So we're going to pull a poll up for anyone who wants to hear from anyone else. Bravely, ThinkHuman, you can go ahead and do that and do that. And in the meanwhile, while everyone's doing the poll, I'm going to go around the room and I want everyone to just give out just 3 takeaways from this. So I am going to start with you, Lauren.
Great. I think really my 3 takeaways would be intersectionality is a way to bring us together. Like unpacking our intersectional identities are a way for us to find ways that connect to each other. I think when we take intersectionality into account in business, it can lead to not only like a better culture, but also like better business outcomes, because we're leveraging like the experiences of those that are at our company to help guide our decisions in the way that we think. And also this is not easy. This is vulnerable. It is very vulnerable to like unpack all of that stuff about yourself, to share, to connect with others in that way. And some people are ready for that, and some people aren't and need to do more work. I think that's what I'd leave us with. How about you, Asia?
Yeah, I think 3 takeaways for me, for this conversation, and what I really hope folks leave this with, intersectionality being a spectrum and something that applies to all of us, no matter how we identify, and our lived experience of our intersectional identities, even if they're shared, it might look and feel a bit different. And so there is that ongoing opportunity to learn from one another. And if I'm relating it to business and also leadership, whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, you can help cultivate an inclusive environment. And so what I'm hoping folks leave here feeling empowered with is, I think, just a curiosity to assess your own company culture at present, see if there are any opportunities to be a bit more inclusive, not just for surface level, but also what might be beneath the surface. I also want to mention folks who are differently abled. I know we haven't been able to get into that too much in this conversation, and there's so many other things, and that just shows how much there is to this topic. So I think that might have been 2 instead of 3 things. I'll end by saying just keep learning, keep going and growing. Yeah.
Hans?
I can go. I think my 3 takeaways, like, first, be curious instead of defensive, because I think a lot of people, when they say something, we get defensive because somebody's attacking my identity, and vice versa. So I think it's very good to be curious instead of just going to defensive mode. Something else is, I think implicit bias is always here. No matter who all of us are, we always have implicit bias. We always have a lens that we're wearing. So learning how to actually understand our own implicit bias, and also understand that other people have implicit bias, and how to actually change and evolve, I think is important. And the other one is, I think, is something else that I've heard that I think is so important. It's like identities change too, right? So maybe one day I'm here, one day my pronouns is he, him, tomorrow maybe they, him, and the afterwards will be whatever it is, it may change. So be okay with people's identity changing. It's not yours, it's okay that it's not your problem. Let someone else be whoever they are, and just be okay with that.
I can go next. So I would say first, remain humble. This work is a work of humility. Even as a DI practitioner, I tell folks all the time, we've been doing this work for 14 years and I still mess up, which leads me to my second point. Know that you're going to make mistakes. go into this work knowing that you're going to try, and your chances are you're going to make mistakes. Take those as learning opportunities to grow and do better the next time. And then lastly, know and remember this is work, right? That it's a practice. That as much as we have conversations on DEI, we, define things, we break down terminology. Ultimately, this is a daily practice. I wake up every day and I say, I have to do better. I have to try. And when I try, I might mess up, but I'm going to wake up the next day and try again. If I don't see it as a practice, then it's all just, words and paper. So just remember that.
Well, this was incredible. Thank you everyone from all over the world for tuning in. Thank you, wonderful panelists, for driving that conversation. I was like this the whole time, and I was the moderator. The energy was real. Happy Pride. And once again, Happy New Year for us regarding Pride, right? Our calendar day starts. All right, thank you.
Bye,
everyone.
folks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.